Okay, John, I'm going to start you off right now. I can tell you're a young, fit man. Running or lifting?
Running all day.
Oh, yes. Okay, I already like him. I was a runner back when I was your age, and
Yeah.
I loved it. But actually just ran my first 5K here this year in years a month ago. So I'm glad to hear
How
that.
how how old do you think I am, Dan?
Oh, maybe 40.
Dude, you should join the circus and guess ages. Yeah, 39. I'll be August 2nd. I'll be 40.
39. Well, you're young.
Yep.
You're young. I'm
Yep.
57, so I've got a couple years on you. So, welcome to Deer
Yeah.
Talk. Now, we are very excited to have you on today.
I'm excited to be here.
So, if you guys don't know John, him and his wife, forgive me, is it Natalie?
Natalie.
Him and his wife, they started. It's called Hook and Barrel. It's a print magazine and a brand. And they're going to say, well, why are you interviewing this guy? You have Modern Hunter. You've done deer and deer hunting with Jason Aldean. That was our foray into this. That was 11 years ago. We had
Yeah.
Lee and Tiffany. We had all sorts of stuff like that. And their focus is different than ours. As you know, people kind of lost their minds. Like, why are you putting celebrities on the cover of DDH? We did it for a little bit. But their thing is more the lifestyle of hunting and fishing and food and country music and all sorts of other things. So that's kind of where you're sitting today with your company, aren't you?
Absolutely. Hook and Barrel is a lifestyle and entertainment magazine for outdoorsmen. Internally and now externally at times, we joke we're Redneck GQ. And that's what it is. And I think that, deer and deer hunting and all of your great publications, we're just a feeder for those. Really, my goal is to bring more people into the fold. And then as people are, you only could read so many deer stories. And so sometimes I just want to back out and maybe
I can
read
keep
good.
reading them all day long. Keep going.
But like sometimes you just want to read something a little bit different. So then you could come back to like essentially like let's say this is like the waiting room, right? You come back to the waiting room, you read something nice there, and then oh yeah, it's deer season again. Boom, let's just jump back into deer and deer hunting, and learn more about my craft there. But you know what? I've read 20 deer stories. I'm still not seeing them. I don't know. I just want to read a story about hopefully the day that I find them and how do I cook them, and then you can come back to us. And so I really look at our competition and the people within our space as we just kind of act as a feeder ground. I don't view anybody really as competition unless they're direct competitors.
And I agree with that. And as a matter of fact, one of my good friends works for you, Nino Bosas. We met when
Nino's the best.
we both started the same year in this industry, which was 30 years ago. And he worked for Whitetail Strategies at the time. So we were direct competitors at the time. But even then, it was a different audience. And that was before the internet. That shows you how old I am. Before the internet, before iPhones and all that kind of stuff. And I've always said outdoorsmen, hunters, people interested in that are going to consume that media no matter where it is, whether it's social media, television, elsewhere. So we talked about that. Tell us, what is your background, John? I know you went to Penn State. I believe you have a degree in marketing.
I do.
But what did you do before you got into media?
Man, so believe it or not, before I got to media, I was in the PR space. So my wife and I owned a small boutique PR firm. Before that, I was working for another PR company when I realized all I was doing was making my boss rich. And so I wanted to start my own. But before that, believe it or not, man, I was actually in the fashion industry.
Really?
Which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. I was hired by Neiman Marcus to be an assistant buyer and went through their executive development program. And that's what brought me down to Texas. And so I joined that group. And quickly I realized I wasn't doing anything cool. I was basically on a DOS-based program. I could have been trading cows. It didn't matter. I certainly wasn't in the glitz and glam of that you people would portray that to be. And also, I was probably the only conservative in a very, very liberal company. And so, what did you do this weekend? Oh, I went to the art show, or I went to see this thing. What did you do? Oh, I went to the gun range. Oh my God. So that was kind of my background. So, but no, I left there in 2000. 9, and that's when I started my own entrepreneurial journey. So
That is awesome. And I know you did not take up hunting. You're kind of an adult onset hunter.
I
Um,
am.
where did you did you grow up in PA or was it somewhere else?
Yep, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, outside the Wilkes-Barre Scranton area,
Yep.
and I was never raised a hunter, but the outdoors was always my place to go. My mom is very much a city girl, and unfortunately, my father passed when I was 7, so I really never had a mentor in the space. Um, but I always gravitated towards the outdoors, and I had a lot of cousins. So my cousin Mike, who's was very instrumental in a lot of things I kind of got into, was big into mountain biking, and I got into mountain biking. I love to be in the woods, riding the trails. And then a few of my cousins were into shooting sports, and then eventually my uncle Rick kind of saw me and went, "Hey, this kid really has the propensity to, you know, thrive in the outdoors. Let's get him up to Maine." And our summer trips, we'd go to Maine and we'd go fly fishing in Baxter State Park, and we would go hike all through, I hiked Mount Katahdin and all up there through the northern parts of through the Appalachian Trail. And I really kind of gravitated towards it. And then on my 18th birthday, my cousin Dave bought me a shotgun, and it's like, "Hey man, let's get into shooting some sporting clays." And so I did that. And then one thing led to another, and I eventually, graduated college, moved down to Texas. And if anybody is from Texas or knows about Texas, the opening day of dove season is like Christmas down here. It's a
It
national
is.
holiday.
Yep.
And at that time, I had a good buddy named Reed, and Reed said, "Hey man, you just dust clays. Why don't you get into dove hunting?" And I'm like, "Well, I see why not. Let's go for it." And I had a super combo license, and it came with some deer tags. And he lived on a ranch out in West Texas, and I've always wanted to go hunting, and I was pretty proficient with the rifle, but I never had the balls to tell him I never shot a deer before. And this is about 15 years ago. And one morning I went out, I had my tags, saw a deer about 300 yards away down the fence line, and we had been doing long range shooting for a while. And I looked at it and went, "Well, don't really know much about this, but let's send one." And whacked the deer, hooves up.
Wow.
And I was like, that was my first deer. And so I walked up to it and went, "Well, I guess you got to clean the thing. How do you do it?" So I broke out the old trusty YouTube.
Oh my gosh.
This, that.
Wow.
I'm like, "Oh, cut here, do this. Oh, what was that? All right, keep cutting here." And before you know it, my phone was covered in blood, guts, and bile or whatever else. But I had learned how to clean my first deer, and all of a sudden, these little pointy teeth in my mouth all of a sudden came to life, and I embraced what was missing in my spirit, and it was the hunting side of things, and something just clicked, and it's been a journey ever since. I've hunted around the world now, and obviously I've dedicated my life to propelling that to other people, and it was kind of one of the creations of Hook and Barrel magazine. It was like, there's got to be more people like me out here, people that are on the fence or people that are interested in it, and they just don't know where to start. And when you pick up some of these other magazines, they're already 200 laps into the Indy 500, and I'm a 20, 30-year-old male at that point. I've got an ego, and I'm not going to ask anybody how to do this. But how many of the guys are actually going to go out and try to do what I did? And matter of fact, I'm sure I screwed up in 100 ways, but I got it done. And that's what started Hook and Barrel magazine. It's my first editorial note I ever wrote was entitled, "My name is John Radzwilla. I'm an endangered species." Because we save everything from habitat to animals, but we don't do a very good job at conserving the hunter. Of course, we want to take young kids out because that looks fun and that looks great on paper and in pictures. But realistically, the young kid is never going to go back to the woods unless their dad drives them. And if their dad, who's my age, let's say, has no interest, they're not going to take little Johnny back out to hunt or anything after he went out to hunt with one of these great organizations. And so I wanted to create a space to foster content that would attract anybody from any walk in life. They could find something in here, whether it be a veteran hunter or a newbie, to fall in love with the lifestyle of the outdoors in order to get that legacy to then to trickle down to the younger kids to forever, hopefully guarantee our rights as outdoorsmen.
I think that's an awesome story. Now, I've talked to a lot of people over the years with similar stories, how they've had, thankfully for you, it was actually blood relatives, cousins or whatever that got you into hunting. But what I find interesting is that background that you talked about, working in what did you say, fashion
Fashion.
industry, and
Yeah.
then so you obviously met a guy that took you shooting and got you into hunting. What
Yeah.
was your close circle like, though? Your family, what did they think about it at that point? In your 20s, maybe early 20s, and you're killing
Yeah.
a deer. Now, we see it here. We've got people in our office that never hunted until they started working here. But I want to hear from you as far as the circle of people that were in your life at the time. How did they take to it? How did they react?
Yeah, it was different. So my mom definitely didn't necessarily care for it, and my wife, girlfriend at the time, she was kind of indifferent. She thought it was neat, but again, camping for her first real true camping experience probably was with me and Uncle Rick in Maine. I wouldn't say it was supportive, but I wouldn't say it was
So it wasn't like, oh my God, how
encouraging.
could you do that? Or
No, no, I was like the first of my group of friends, and everyone thought, dude, everyone thought I was the most badass of badass. Oh man, he killed a deer. Like, and now I look back on it, I'm like, you go kill a grizzly in, Alaska. That's pretty badass. But a deer, I mean, that's awesome. But it's nothing like it's not like I'm John Rambo out there. But I was treated that way, and maybe it fluffed me up a little bit and got me excited. But about being a hunter and being an outdoorsman. This
it's
man of
probably
the
easier
woods.
for a deer too, because people are acclimated to venison. That's probably the
Yeah.
bigger connection.
Yeah, but believe it or not, the next big trip, when I opened up my PR company, I was doing search engine optimization and work for an outfitter out in Africa named JP Kleinhans, and he invited me over to do some plains game in Africa, and I went over there, and my wife Natalie actually she shot one dove, during dove season, and her next animal that she shot was a zebra.
Dang. Wow.
And yeah, and just dead eye. She even called the stripe. She put $20 down on it and said, what color, black or white? And like it was the roulette table in Vegas, and sent it, and again, perfect shot. And but we went and posted that, and this is before I knew, and this was maybe 12, 15 years ago. And the backlash that we got about hunting in Africa was insane. And what's interesting is I just was coming back from Canada last week on a media hunt with Mossberg, Swarovski, and Hornady. We're up in bear country in northern Alberta, and I got a message on Facebook from a guy, and Pat reached out to me and said, "Hey man, I remember about 12 years ago. It's been bothering me ever since. I gave you a ton of crap about what you and your wife did, talking about hunting that zebra and hunting plains game in Africa." And he goes, "It's been bothering me ever since, and I wanted to reach out to you and apologize for that. I'm going through a few things in my head and sorting it out, and I'll just tell you, like, my behavior weighed on me since then. And I applaud, where you've come from and what you've grown into and the magazine that you've built all around that lifestyle. And I feel bad that I discouraged you back then from hunting." And so it's interesting to see this. Actually, this is the first time I tell this story actually to you, Dan, or to anybody, frankly. I don't think my wife knows about it yet. And it's interesting how people eventually come around. And so I probably received more flack as a hunter as I kind of got into my career than I did anything.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I seldom get those kind of replies. Normally it's the other way, and I've just learned to turn a blind eye to it, in the fact that not everybody's going to love you, not everybody's going to accept you, but you still have to put yourself forward. How did you respond to that early criticism, and how did that shape how you post things, how you present things? Did it change any way that you go about it?
Early on, I reacted as probably maybe a mature hunter would have, and I immediately went into all of the conservation efforts and, hey, what does this mean, and feeding the local populations, and hey, by the way, this is an overpopulated area, and zebra tend to kill others young, and for all the food sources and water. And then we went into I went into this whole diatribe, and I can't remember all of it because it was over a decade ago. But I went to all the reasons, and they responded basically, "I don't care, you're a killer."
Yep.
And then I went into, but we fed villagers. We don't care, you're a killer. But we did, and they didn't care. And eventually I just defriended everybody. I'm like, I don't need to deal with this. And then after we reconnected just last week, he refriended me. And I said, he said, "I am really sorry." I said, "You know what? I just realized that humans are human, and sometimes there's emotion in things, and there's your thinking brain, and then there's your feeling brain. And you guys are operating in your feeling brain, and I was operating in my thinking brain. And thinking is going to say facts, and the feeling brain doesn't care about facts. They only care about what it feels at that moment." And I think maybe a decade of maturity between that point and today, or last week, really helped me understand that. And as a young man, you just always want to fight. You just want to throw out those facts, but you're never going to get anywhere. And so I think, it takes a combination of both your feeling brain and your thinking brain to actually have a logical and constructive conversation, because otherwise you're just spouting facts off and yelling about your emotions. And, we had a great conversation, and he's like, "The more I thought about it, what you said made sense." And it took him 10 years to figure that out. and I said, "You know what? It took me about 10 years, Pat, to figure out that you were using your feeling brain, not your thinking brain. And you weren't being an idiot. That's how you perceive this particular item." And so I think that would just paint a really good picture that I think would be useful for outdoorsmen to realize that a lot of times when you're talking to the antis, they're not thinking with their thinking brain. They're thinking with their feeling brain. And whatever they feel at that moment, that's what they're spouting out. And that's what we see a lot in today's politics on both sides. And it's the maturity to step back and go, look, it's a combination of both. And until we could think with our both, whether it takes a day or 10 years, we're never going to have a meaningful conversation. And until then, we just shouldn't be friends until we could actually have a meaningful conversation, because otherwise you're just yelling at people on the internet.
I would love to bottle this and build this into a short, because what John just said there, I think, resonates across our entire community. And it's something that I haven't been able to eloquently put like he just did. Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbows and the all-new TX 440. This compact crossbow features new twin riser technology as well as a rail-less design to provide superior accuracy. Coming in at only 28 inches long and 6.5 inches wide, the TX 440 packs a powerful punch in a compact, ergonomic design. For more information, visit 10pointcrossbows.com. We get stuck in that feeling brain.
Oh, yeah.
We're feeling excited. We post that picture and the deer's tongue's hanging out, and we're showing the big, sever broadhead wound in the deer, which is awesome. But for a deer hunter, you think it's awesome. But you have to I went through trapper education here a month ago because I had to, because I never had it, and I want to trap a fisher here on my own property, which I can't do unless I have a trapper education. I can trap anything else on my own property in Wisconsin, but I can't do that. So when I went through that class, if you guys want to find the most in-tune people with feeling and thinking, are trappers. And these educators, basically part of their curriculum is I was the second youngest guy in the class. There was 9 of us. There was no kids in this class. And he basically said, when you post something to social media, stop and think about it. Now, we say that to our kids. We say that to our friends, just about anything. But trapping especially is under the crosshairs more than anything. And he said, even though you think it's cool that you caught that coyote or raccoon or whatever in that trap, there's a bunch of people, and we've said this back when I first started here, the non-hunters are the ones that I don't want to say have to impress, but we want to put ourselves to that certain level. So like, I would say that would be a general rule for anybody in the hunting or fishing or trapping community, is if you want to post something on social media, think about it first and then present it in a way that you can have a rational conversation, hopefully not an argument, And if it turns into an argument, then, like you said, you got to pick and choose your friends. But I think that's a great point, John, in the fact that when you can step out of yourself and look at it from the other person's perspective, then you can probably rein in how you portray yourself. I think that's a really good. I wasn't expecting to get this deep with you today on the podcast, but I think that's a great point that you bring up there.
Well, and I'll double tap that one further. And my team has heard this ad nauseum, but this is how I look at things. Elections are won in the margins, and that's generally independent vote. And it's generally by about 1%, right? And so also our hunting and shooting rights are preserved in the outcomes of these elections. So you have these people in the middle, or these people to the left of the argument, that don't see it how we see it. And for me, a win in what I'm trying to do in Hook and Barrel is attract people from the middle to my way of thinking and to our lifestyle, and at least on the left side to bring them to the middle, or even better, a win would bring them around to our lifestyle as outdoorsmen. But as outdoorsmen, oftentimes we really do ourselves a disservice. We shoot ourselves in the foot, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. Yeah, definitely pun intended. We shoot ourselves in the foot.
Not with a severed broadhead, though.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
maybe a little CCI short or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, we give the anti and the people in the middle the ammunition to paint the ignorant stereotypes on us that they tend to do by the things that we portray ourselves as. As outdoorsmen, we all know the outcome of a hunt. It's going to end in a dead animal with some level of blood. Do we really need to push that out there? So we could bow up and say, yeah, I'm not hiding from anything. But what you're doing is you're allowing just a picture, which is worth 1,000 words, that 1,000 words are not the words that you're speaking. The words that are being spoken over that picture in social media is the perception of what the viewer is seeing, right? So your hunting friend's like, yeah, man, that's 1,000 words of an awesome hunt. But there's far more of the people in the middle and on the left that are going to look at that and go, see, I told you, they're just bloodthirsty killers. And
They're
they
not
just want to
reading
kill
the
things for
story. They're
trophy.
looking at the photo.
They're making assumptions. And so my goal is to attract somebody from the middle or to the left, because if we could do that, if we could even get 1% to our way of thinking, we've now potentially just preserved our hunt, fish, shoot rights for generations to come. And, it's just a shame a lot of times I see other publications, I see other outdoorsmen, all these things portraying things in such a blood and guts and glory kind of way that I'm like, hey, to us, that's awesome. But to the others, to the 85% of the population or whatever that is that doesn't hunt, that is allowing that ignorant stereotype to be solidified on us as outdoorsmen.
100%.
And that frustrates me.
100%. I actually want to stay in that point for one question, because I want to get your take on this. I saw this last week on Twitter. I'll always call it Twitter. Sorry, I'm not going to call it X. But it's within our industry. It's a common thread that I personally think is flawed. They say the hunting community doesn't vote, quote unquote. Like, I don't buy that. I really don't, because I think I want to get your opinion on it. But I think most hunters skew right, obviously. And if you look at, anyway, Pew Research, it's, I don't know, it's like 85% or something like that, as opposed to leaning left. What is your take on it? I don't buy that narrative, but I wanted to get somebody's opinion outside of my own. Because I hear it a lot. They're saying hunters don't vote. We got to hunt the vote, blah, 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 blah. That's great. We can preach to the choir all we want, but I don't think that is accurate.
Dan, at first blush, I think I agree with you. I called BS on that because I've seen that same thing. And I've met with some of the guys from Hunt the Vote and Rock the Vote, all those kind of things. And as many stats as they show me, it's just hard to fathom that's the truth. And I don't care if I have a big buck coming into my feeder. The difference between having a 4-year administration like we do right now versus what we could have had is not worth that big buck, in my opinion. And I would still show up and go sit for the evening hunt. I don't, but I've seen the numbers and I've heard the speeches, and it's hard to say, hey, you're lying when this is what you're showing me. So I guess that's a very nebulous way of answering that. I really don't know what to believe.
I think we need more research. We need more research on it.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't make sense, but
it doesn't hurt to preach to vote, but I think that it's, I don't know. Okay. So on a lighter topic, I have to get to a couple stories here. First of all,
Sure.
would you rather, or who, I should say, who do you favor, Mike Tyson or Jake Paul?
Oh man, dude, I grew up watching or playing Knockout on Nintendo, and I just want to see Tyson knock his goofy little face out.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. In the same vein, who would you rather, or who would you support, go for in a fight, Nino Bosas or Brian McCombie?
Oh, that would be scrappy, but I know Nino, Brian's a great guy. Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm gonna go with Nino. He's scrappy.
That's because he's
no,
listening.
No, he's like, I could just see him like going for the ankles like a chihuahua.
Okay, I got to show you something here. This was my segue right here. I got to take my glasses off. I got this scar right here from Nino, right here above my eye.
Oh, so you actually had this fight?
No.
So he doesn't go for the ankles.
I got to tell the story now.
All right.
He goes for the scope bite. So it was, you said West Texas. Where were you in West Texas?
I was in Sonora. Was the first deer I shot.
So San Angelo, I think it's kind of West Texas, isn't it?
Yeah, Sonora is about an hour and a half south of San Angelo.
Okay, so it's somewhere outside of San Angelo. This would have been 1996 or 7. Can't remember. You were much younger then. We get off the flight, get into camp. It's a turkey hunt. I might have told this story. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell it again. So it's a turkey hunt with Mossy Oak, and they've got some celebrities there. Charlie O'Brien, Major League Baseball player. Anyways, so Nino and I are the first ones off the plane, and the guide says, "Hey, you boys want to shoot some javelinas?" And I'm like, "Sure, I've never shot a javelina. That'd be so cool." So we're driving around, and Nino at the time, if you can't believe it, he looked exactly like Derek Jeter. He kind of looked like you. He kind of looks like you now. He had the high and tight haircut, Yankees t-shirt, gray with the Yankees logo on it, baseball cap on backwards, and we're going, and there's a bunch of javelinas in this sendero, and we knew nothing about them. So we're like, "Are they spooky?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, they're really spooky. You can't move." I'm like, okay. He goes, "You're gonna have to crawl to them, so you know where this is going. These guys are messing with us." And so we're in the dirt. I've got the guide's 30-30 with a scope. Nino's got one of the guide's other rifles, and we're doing this belly crawl. Well, behind they're just like, laughing. And we had no idea what was going on, but we get about 50 yards from these javelinas, and the guy says, "Okay, inch your way up." And just as that moment, we both got the scope up there, Nino just breaks out screaming. He's like, "Ah!" He throws his gun down. Ah! He gets up. I'm just like, I'm not. Boom! And I shoot, and I see the javelina go down. They had us crawl on top of a red ant hill.
Oh, one of those huge ones, or
yes,
like the size of a tabletop.
And he's getting just bit like crazy by red ants. All of a sudden, I come up, and I knew I got the javelina, and you thought these guys saw a ghost, and I'm like, "What? What's wrong?" And I just feel, and Ian knows I am. If you cut, I can be elbow deep in a deer's chest cavity, but if you cut yourself, I'm gonna start puking. I look down and blood is just gushing down my face onto my, and they're just like petrified. Like the guy's like, "Holy cow, we're gonna get in trouble here." Well, to his credit, that young New Yorker, he looked like one of these gals that's got the midriff. He cut his shirt in half, and I wish I would have saved it, but I had half a Yankees shirt tied around my head for the next day, and that's where I got this. That's where I got this.
That's so funny. Yeah, I could see Nino. Now you said Jeter. I could see him with a baseball bat, like his New York Italian self.
Oh yeah, and his little.
On his hand.
Yep. No, that's.
Yeah.
I got many Nino stories. Many. We could probably fill an entire podcast with those, but
Well, I'll tell
that's
you
why
what.
I go with McCombie because I know what I'm getting with Nino. I'm going to get a cut forehead again, so I'm going to
Well,
stay away from that.
Brian's another one of those veterans of the outdoors, and I selected him as our firearms editor.
Oh, he knows his stuff, man.
He knows his stuff, but what I like about McCombie and why I hesitate in this Nino McCombie matchup is McCombie doesn't pull punches. He tells you how it is. His give a damn broke probably 30 years ago.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so he's just pissed a lot. And so you take that like a scrappy New Yorker and a pissed off Midwesterner that could like sit in Wisconsin at negative 40 degrees.
And he can shoot,
Yeah, and he can shoot. And Nino could shoot too, but I don't know. You've got two very, very, I think that's an evenly matched fight.
evenly matched.
I'm proud to have two champions on the team.
You got a great stuff. So let's talk about deer for a minute.
Sure.
What is your favorite? Like, I know you gun hunt. Do you bow hunt also?
Actually, I prefer hunting with a bow.
Okay.
I think that the rifle side is awesome, but I've got to a point where I like a bit more of a challenge, and I really, for deer, I'm eating up with whitetail hunting. It's just been something that has progressively gotten
That's awesome.
more obsessive over the time, and I think. So I haven't even really hunted deer in Texas for a long time. I actually have a lease in southeastern Oklahoma up in the Kiamichi Mountains. And these whitetail are unlike any whitetail that I've ever really hunted. In Texas, they come into feeders and you can see them a little bit, or they come out of the brush, but like it's pretty flat. Up in the Midwest and hunting in Illinois, you're hunting the sides of cornfields and soybean fields and elevated blinds and stands. But where I'm at, it's really, really backcountry. First off, we finally got cell phone reception after about 5 years, and it's still very, very spotty. So mostly I'm using my Garmin InReach. It's 16 river crossings to get in. The closest hospital is 59.8 miles away, and the town that has a general store and I think 3 trailers is like 7 miles down the dirt road that gets into the entrance of this greater, I think it's like 45,000 on one side of the highway, and there's like an additional 20,000 on the other side that we lease a part of. And so you are in these far flung corners of like this backcountry area where you have really no connection to anybody, and you're out there for yourself. So it's a lot of climbers that we're using. The deer really don't come into anything because I almost joke, they're like mountain whitetail. And they're very difficult. They're very difficult to pattern. They really don't need to come to any of my feeders. Like, you could have a feeder, but they have all their own acorn sources. There's a ton of water. And so you really have to pattern these deer, and you spend your Januaries and Februaries looking for the rubs and scrapes. And then you start trying to pattern it all out through the spring, and then you're feeding them, and you're running game cameras, and you're like, I feel like I'm a CSI detective. And then I'm 25 yards away from them, up 30 feet in a tree in a climber, and I get up there at like 4 o'clock in the morning and finish out the last hour of my sleep just before sunrise. And there's something so much more gratifying to me than just hunting over where over a feeder in Texas where I've got a 100-yard shot. There was one deer I called the Joker because he would be at one spot when I was at the other, and then I'd be at the other and he'd be at the other spot. And I was like, you gotta be joking me. This is getting crazy. It took me 3 years to get him. And he was my target buck for 3 years. I finally got him. And I remember when I shot him, I just called my wife like in tears. Like, I finally got this deer. It's been 3 years of blood, sweat, and just grueling labor to get to this deer. And, I did it with a bow, and, yeah, man, that
is pretty cool.
That's what I love. I love the challenge of all. And then heck, even coming down to base camp, we had to build a 20 by 20 basically shed, put solar panels on it, wood fire furnace, like figure out how to build all that stuff. And so for me, it just wasn't the hunt. It was the culmination of like 5 years worth of effort to get to where I am today up there. And that's why I like bow hunting more than rifle hunting. And I'm sure rifle hunters have the same experience in some aspect, but just for me, if given the choice and it's my hunt and it's not a media hunt or something like that, or a demo kind of thing for a rifle, I'm picking up a bow.
That's a real hunt. That's a real deer camp. That sounds old school. When you actually mentioned Maine before, that was one of my toughest hunts. I didn't get a deer. We hunted a week, but it was like we didn't. Yeah, we actually did use climbers. That was back in the day when they had API climbers. They were kind of bigger, but they were comfortable. But way back in there, we didn't. Thankfully, didn't have to carry them back in there. But when you mentioned Maine, I just kind of cringed because I was like, I said
There's
the
nothing easy about Maine.
title for my autobiography is going to be "I Heard a Raven on the Third Day," because that's the only that's the only living creature that I could say was in the woods with me at the same time. But Oklahoma, nobody would think of that, and I know they have some mountainous areas, but no one would think of like, a real challenging, tough, grueling hunt. You wouldn't think I would not be picking Oklahoma. I might be picking like West Virginia or Oregon or some Montana. There's places, even Wyoming. There's places.
Now I'm on your darn podcast, and everyone's going to get a lease down in Oklahoma.
That's it. I ruined it for you. Yeah,
they're
gonna be heading in there.
Just about an hour southwest is Arbuckle Mountains, and there's elk there. And then, so I mean, it looks really elky. We've even had mountain lions on camera, and not just like one of those like redneck superstitions, like there's a wildcat out here. No, I mean legit freaking cat out there. We have black bears, really big black bears.
Bobcats, I think, too. Yeah.
Bobcats and coyotes.
Yep.
Timber rattlers and copperheads. And it's pretty rough country out there. And it's, a matter of fact, every year in Honobi, Oklahoma, they have the annual gathering of cryptozoologists for the Bigfoot Fest. And they think Bigfoot lives there. And, I mean, that's how backwoods this area is.
Wow. So if you couldn't hunt Oklahoma, okay, I'm going to take Illinois off the table because you mentioned that too. What would be your next go-to place?
Couldn't hunt Oklahoma for whitetail?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I just got back from northern Alberta, and it really made me think about the whitetail. I saw some of the big whitetail sheds. And so like Saskatchewan, Canada, like big freaking freezing cold.
Yep. That's tough.
Just like the suck is at an all-time high up there.
Embrace the suck. I knew the guy who wrote that book. Yep. He was actually he was my boss at a time. He was a runner, and he wrote a book called Embrace the Suck. And I always say that about hunting Saskatchewan. And it's a different kind of suck because it's like you're sitting in a blind for hours. And Alberta's the same way, but you can't bait in Alberta. They can bait in Saskatchewan. It is tough. It is a tough. It's mentally the toughest hunt I think there is.
Well, and I'll go back to your first question, running or lifting. I hate running. I've lifted since I've been about 14 years old. But what I love about running is the mental toughness side of it because it sucks. Your feet hurt. The further you run, the further you got to run back. So you're always playing a game with yourself. And so that's what I love in hunting. I my friends all think I'm nuts. The friends that I hunt with now, they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go up in my, they've got these big, ladder stands and they have their iPad, cradle, and they got a hook and a thing for their drink and a bag full of, moon pies or whatever. I'm like, it's raining, it's miserable. They still got to eat, and I'm going out. And like, are you nuts, man? I'm like, no. The more this sucks, the more I like it. And maybe it's something sadistic within me, but like, I love hunts that challenge me to my core. And back to Maine, my saying that I got from Maine is we got stranded on Mount Katahdin. I'd sprained my ankle pretty bad, and I had to get off of Mount Katahdin. And our pastor at the time came up with the saying that we still live by: endure with persistence. And whether it's running or it's hunting a shitty situation, I just endure with persistence. And the more I have to endure, the more, for some weird reason, I love it. So
that is awesome. Well, John, thank you for joining us today. Where can people go? They can find out more information about the magazine and everything else you got going on.
hookandbarrel.com.
Easy enough.
You go to hookandbarrel.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or X. Whatever you prefer, Dan.
Yep,
Twitter.
Twitter.
You can follow us on Facebook. Hell, we're even on Threads. You can follow us there. But
there we go.
We have our YouTube channel. We actually have a Spotify channel we just started. So songs for your hunts and songs from the artists that we feature in the magazine. But your hub for it all is hookandbarrel.com.
Hookandbarrel.com. John Radzwilla, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to have you on again. This was very nice. I love the depth and contemplation you put in some of these answers.
Well, I appreciate the questions, Dan. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me on.
All right, for John Radzwilla, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now. The only thing we ask you to do before you click off, like and subscribe. That's it. And if you're listening to the podcast, thank you. That's wherever podcasts can be found, Apple and elsewhere. And then, just like John said, we've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, wherever you can find deer and deer hunting. All we ask you to do is like and subscribe. Until next Thursday, we'll bring you another new episode of Deer Talk Now.